Dreams are peaceful. Dreams are safety. But this is no dream. This is a harsh reality. As Sora comes to, he finds himself in a familiar environment, but confronted with an unfamiliar face. The young man skips straight past introductions and begins to question Sora as to who he is and how did he get here. Still dazed, Sora does his best to explain that he doesn't even know where here is, and what feels like mere moments ago, he was fighting for his life. Sora loses himself in thought and goes on about Xemnas, his friends, and the imminent danger that was facing the worlds. Sora's heart begins to race as he speaks faster and faster, reliving the intensity of the battle. Then suddenly, he catches himself. Just as his emotions were about to spill over, Sora realizes he's speaking to a complete stranger. They're probably just an everyday person wondering why Sora's in their part of town. So Sora tries to backtrack and dismiss everything he said as him talking about a bad dream. The awkward silence that follows is palpable. But then, the young man begins to speak. He tells Sora that he knew Sora wasn't one of his the moment he laid eyes on him. He wasn't sure who Sora belonged to, but now he knows he's one of Cosmos's. The young man introduces himself as Joshua, Cosmos's equal in this reality. This is Kingdom Hearts Remake, Part 11, The Travelers. Based on Sora's earlier ramblings, Josh was able to deduce that Sora's arrival here was completely accidental. The way Joshua sees it, Sora and Xemnas' little spat generated the perfect combination of energies to tear at the boundaries of their universe. And although it was brief, it was more than enough time for Sora and who knows what else to slip through. As he continues to piece things together, Joshua can already see the headache that fixing this is going to be. For starters, getting Sora home. The boundaries that separate universes aren't easy to pass through. They were designed that way to protect the autonomy of the individual creators. Normally, passing something through the boundary requires coordination on both sides, so Sora popping up like he did is pretty unprecedented. Not to say that Joshua's never seen a dimension hopper or two, but they're few and far between, and the only ones that aren't wiped out on sight are so harmless it's not worth the effort. Moving on to the second part of Joshua's headache. When Sora crossed through the tear in the boundary, a tremendous amount of foreign energy flowed in alongside him. When energies from different universes come in contact with each other, there's no way of knowing how they'll react. It could be completely benign, or something catastrophic. Unfortunately, in this case, it's closer to the latter. The energies we know as light and darkness are completely foreign to this universe, and when they pass through along with Sora, they supercharged some of the more hostile creatures on the nearby planets. These creatures, known as nightmares, are normally kept in check by an opposing force, known as spirits. Not too dissimilar from the conflict that we're familiar with between Keyblade wielders and Heartless. But these newly amped up nightmares are a dangerous variable that could wildly upset the balance. Now you may be thinking, if Joshua is as powerful as Cosmos, Why doesn't he just snap his fingers and be rid of these nightmares? As powerful of beings as Cosmos and Joshua are, they're still bound by their own set of rules and regulations. And in this specific case, it's a matter of jurisdiction. Joshua can only exert his power and influence on beings that are native to his universe. The original intent behind this was to stop a being like Joshua from becoming a malicious, multi-universal threat. By restricting their power to home territory, it ensures that they have to play nice with their neighbors. But that's not to say that it's necessarily foolproof or efficient. For example, Joshua himself is physically incapable of harming Sora. Now, of course, Joshua could enlist or arrange for something to harm Sora, but he himself physically can't, because Sora falls under Cosmos' jurisdiction. So, how does this all tie back into our nightmare problem? Because these nightmares have now become entangled with energy created by Cosmos, they technically fall under both jurisdictions, meaning Joshua can't do anything to them. He would either have to work in tandem with Cosmos, or find a mortal who is powerful enough to assist him. It's ironic that mortals are considered lower beings, and yet in some ways have more freedom. And lucky for Joshua, the perfect mortal candidates are standing right in front of him. Joshua then reveals that he's been simultaneously having a similar conversation with Riku the entire time. The instant they crossed through the boundary, Joshua had been closely monitoring both of them. And the moment they woke up, Joshua was already prepared with his line of questions. Although they landed in separate parts of town, it wasn't a big deal for Joshua to be in two places at once. At least while he's on home turf, anyway. Now that Joshua has pieced together that Sora and Riku are allies, he figured it was safe to reveal they'd been having one big group chat. However, Joshua does share that he plans on keeping Riku and Sora separate, as there is something he's still cautious about. Even though Joshua has existed as long as Cosmos, he's never seen an instance where two foreign beings cross the boundary at the same time. His concern is that if Sora and Riku come in contact with each other, it could create even more abnormalities in his universe. So while he does need both of their help, he needs them to work independently. As Joshua continues to speak, Sora and Riku feel a tremendous sense of relief. The fact that they both survived the rift and ended up in the same place is nothing short of a miracle. And although Joshua's keeping them separated, he's at least created a means for them to see each other's faces. Faces that look a bit different. In the middle of Joshua's speech, Sora and Riku let out an audible gasp. They both look younger. But how? After pausing for a moment, Joshua offers a possible explanation. The boundary that exists between universes is an area where the trajectory of time and space is completely unpredictable. Joshua theorizes that while their bodies moved through space, time moved through their bodies. Joshua jokes that Sora and Riku were lucky. They could have just as easily popped out as infants or elderly men. But on a more serious note, they could have been completely erased from existence. Joshua takes a moment to remind them both that their arrival here is unprecedented, and despite his position and power, even he doesn't know what might happen. If they take anything for granted, it could be their last mistake. At this point in their journey, Sora and Riku are no strangers to high stakes, so they take Joshua's warning to heart. And since they're on the subject of danger, Sora and Riku ask Joshua if he's detected a third arrival. Xemnas could have just as easily survived the blast, and as far as they know, there's still a good chance that Xemnas was Chaos in mortal form. Joshua tells them both that he has eyes everywhere, and so far he hasn't detected anything. But hearing that there might be a rogue chaos running around is unnerving for even him. It turns out that Joshua was very familiar with the Cosmos and Chaos situation, as they had built their respective universes at around the same time. This is a large part of the reason why Joshua's universe looks so familiar. It's because all three of them collaborated on architecture. So Joshua knows firsthand about Chaos's destructive preferences. Joshua tells Sora and Riku that he needs to get the word out to his peers that Chaos might be on the loose. But before he can make his exit, he needs to set Sora and Riku up for success. He starts by giving each of them their very own companion spirit. These spirits in particular have a few unique abilities that separate them from their normal counterparts. In addition to being able to aid in combat, these spirits have the ability to detect the special nightmares, and they can create portals between worlds. By diving into these portals, Sora and Riku can quickly move from one world to the next, which will hopefully expedite the nightmare cleanup process. Additionally, the spirits have been given the memo to keep Sora and Riku separated, so they'll make sure that they don't cross paths while they're out chasing down nightmares. Joshua was planning on teaching Sora and Riku the basics of spirit combat, but since he's got to go in a hurry, he went ahead and picked out some other tutors for them. There aren't many individuals who are even capable of forming bonds with spirits, and the ones who do have the ability are tasked with a role that's similar to Keyblade wielders, so they don't exactly have a lot of downtime. But given the urgent nature of this assignment, Joshua went ahead and summoned some of his top performers here. Sora and Riku will each do their meet and greets in separate districts, and as soon as they're done, it's straight to work. As they say, no rest for the weary. Turning our attention back to our hero's home reality, we see that there's trouble brewing on the home front. Far below the surface of Hollow Bastion, in the organization's most top-secret facility, we see a conversation between Xigbar and a young Xehanort. Xigbar expresses his gratitude to be back in a vessel of his own, but he never could have imagined that Xehanort, especially this version of him, would be the one to bring him back from the brink. Xehanort explains that although it defies the natural order, he somehow traveled through time and wound up back in the past. The journey through time not only reverted his body back to a previous state, but it did the same thing to his heart. Xehanort was no longer a nobody, and even more shockingly, his being had been completely separated from Terra. As to where Terra may have ended up is currently unknown. Not that it particularly matters to Xehanort now, as his body is back in its physical prime. And with Terra's influence no longer a factor, Xehanort's thoughts and feelings are once again his own. Ever since Terra and Xehanort became one entity, it was assumed that Xehanort was in control of their combined form. And while he may have been the dominant one at first, he underestimated Terra's perseverance. For years, they fought tirelessly for control, pulling back and forth from one side to the other, until eventually, they began to meld in the middle. With time, Terra and Xehanort ceased to exist, and in their place, a new individual came to be. A hybrid personality with a hazy patchwork of memories. Up until now, you may have noticed that Xehanort's primary motivation, his desire to see his family again, has been somewhat vague and lacked a degree of concrete detail. We don't know their names, their relation to Xehanort, and we've only seen a short glimpse of them in a picture. Well, that's because they're an illusion. This family that Xehanort's been chasing doesn't exist. It's a perversion of memories and a mangling of desires. The desire actually comes from Terra. It's his yearning to see Aqua and Vin again, his family, the people that make up his home. But their faces have been filled in with Xehanort's memories, a random collection of peers from his past, people that Xehanort had a connection with, but not one so strong that he would destroy worlds over. However, that willingness to march towards destruction in the pursuit of one's goal, that came from Xehanort. So with all of this in mind, some of Terranort's memories and actions can be recontextualized. A few examples. Xehanort's memory of his home world being destroyed. That experience actually belongs to Terra. It originates from the day he watched the land of departure be consumed by darkness. Example 2. The unusual amount of resources that Xemnas was willing to dedicate in order to preserve Vin's body. Terra's desire to protect Vin is why he's been kept in stasis. But Xehanort's desire to push the limits of research is why Vin's body was used in the replica program. While we're on the subject of Vin, part of the reason why Xemnas has shown mercy and restraint towards Roxas is also tied into Terra. When Xemnas allowed Roxas to go free, it wasn't because he actually gave in to Xion's threat, but rather, it was somewhat like a second chance, an opportunity to live out a peaceful life that Vin was never able to. Terra couldn't give that to him in his first life, so he wasn't going to miss the chance in this one. Finally, example 3. Xemnas' fixation on the power of waking. The knowledge of that technique comes from Xehanort, but that knowledge has been confounded by Terra's inexperience. Because Terra never reached the rank of Master, he doesn't understand the power's inner workings, and his naivete influenced Xemnas. Instead of respecting the power of waking as something with rigid principles, it became this miracle solution that it could never actually live up to. When we look back at Terranort and Xemnas' actions, it's hard to say where Terra began and Xehanort ended. Even Xehanort's Keyblade couldn't tell, which is why we never saw Xemnas wield it, despite it being in his possession. The Keyblade no longer recognized him as its master, which was one of the many signs that tipped off Chaos that something was wrong. We could spend some serious time dissecting this, but right now we need to get back to present Xehanort, or young Xehanort. As Xehanort and Xigbar continue to converse, Xehanort explains that while he was still Xemnas, he lost a battle to Sora. Sora's final attack did something to him that he still doesn't quite understand, and shortly after, he was pulled into a rift. The details from that point on are somewhat of a blur. Although he couldn't figure out the how, Xehanort realized he was in the past. Xehanort had landed in Hollow Bastion, mere moments before Maleficent's attack. He was cautious of the anomalies that might occur if he interacted with his past self, so he made the conscious decision to stay off of the organization's radar until Xemnas was out of the picture. That's not to say that he wasn't observing from afar, which is why he was able to swoop in and grab Xion when the moment was right. This course of action could have also created an anomaly. But Xehanort knew that without Xion, it could take an entire lifetime to ever reach Kingdom Hearts again. And if he couldn't reach Kingdom Hearts with the time that he was given, what was even the point of a second chance? After Xigbar was defeated by Sora, Xehanort made sure that Xion was in position to absorb his heart. And now that he had 12 Dark Hearts in tow, he set a course for Hollow Bastion. Upon arriving at the organization's facility, Xehanort began the process of extraction. Because of how Xion's frame was structured, removing hearts from her was supposed to be smooth and painless by design. But Xehanort opted to make the experience as excruciating as possible. Whether it was to punish Xion or for his own satisfaction is hard to say. But now that the hearts were removed, Xehanort could make his first attempt at a successful recompletion. Recompletion was a phenomenon that Vexen and Xemnas had experimented with for decades, but had never successfully implemented. The theory was that the regenerative properties that stopped nobodies from aging were so powerful that even if every molecule in the body was destroyed, so long as the heart was intact, it was kept separated from Kingdom Hearts, and it was stimulated with enough energy, you could successfully regrow the vessel. In the past, they had attempted this several times with Ansem. Even with substantial damage dealt to his body, he was able to continually regenerate. But there was a threshold they couldn't go beyond, as the more and more material you stripped away, the harder it was to keep the heart contained within the vessel. It was overcoming this roadblock that partially served as a motivator for Xion's original design. Xion was the missing link. And in a more cruel sense, her power would be the birdcage that would keep others trapped on this plane. Ansem was the first step in this process. Xion was the second. And now Xehanort has finally seen it through to fruition. By working non-stop, Xehanort has managed to successfully recomplete every member of Organization 13 whose heart was in his possession. As far as the fate of the worlds were concerned, this was an unnervingly efficient start for the organization's new leader. Xigbar asks Xehanort if the battle that he was referring to earlier, the one in which he lost to Sora, was the same one that had kicked off back at the organization's homeworld. Xehanort pauses for a moment. He tells him that the battle that Xemnas is destined to lose hasn't taken place yet. And it doesn't even take place in this reality. As we catch back up with Sora and Riku in the alternate Traverse Town, we see that they've made contact with their impromptu coaches. Sora has been paired up with Neku, a young man who's somewhat standoffish, but earnest, while Riku has been set up with Shiki, a young woman who's far more sociable, although it can come across a bit forward at times. It's a tall order, but Neku and Shiki do their best to bring Sora and Riku up to speed. In this universe, people's inner thoughts generate an energy known as noise. Noise is imperceivable to the vast majority of people, hence why they can't hear each other's thoughts. But as large quantities of noise build up in an area, it eventually bundles together and produces a physical form. Noise that's generated from thoughts that are hopeful, compassionate, joyful creates spirits, whereas when those thoughts are jealous, malicious, or even apathetic, a nightmare is formed. And as you'd likely expect, the bigger the bundle of noise, the more powerful the creation. Now, regardless of whether or not it's a spirit or a nightmare, these beings don't tend to stick around for more than a day or so. And that's because of sleep. While people are dreaming, their minds tend to be more at ease, which means there's less thoughts racing around their head. And if there's less thoughts, then there's less noise. And if there's less noise bundled together, then the spirits and nightmares dissipate. However, on rare occasions, usually involving a nightmare, the noise is stubbornly persistent. In those instances, people like Neku and Shiki, who have the unique ability to directly interface with noise, are called in to break apart the nightmares. Joshua originally created the whole noise situation as a means to gauge his universe. If every mortal could reach a level of selflessness and enlightenment, nightmares would cease to exist. That's why every so often, he randomly selects people like Neku and Shiki to interface with the noise. If they can overcome constantly confronting the worst of people's inner thoughts, then hopefully, that means that generation after generation, mortals are progressing in the right direction. So whereas Cosmos is mostly hands-off and hope for the best, Joshua likes to go in and test the waters every so often. Now that Sora and Riku have gotten a better understanding of the framework, it's time for some practical application. Because spirits are naturally amicable and good-natured, it's not hard to recruit the local variety to your side. But what can be challenging is conducting them on the battlefield. Although the bulk of Sora's fighting experience has been within a team, surprisingly, it's Riku who acclimates faster to working alongside spirits. Riku's always had an affinity for teamwork and leadership, but because he's spent so much of his journey solo, he just hasn't had the same opportunities to showcase it. After Riku gets the Shiki seal of approval, his spirit opens up a portal for him. Although he's a bit shy about it, Riku makes sure to take a moment to thank Shiki for her time. And then, eager to see what this new universe has to offer, he goes full speed into his first dive. But the timing couldn't be worse, because two of the target nightmares have just descended onto Traverse Town. Neku tells Sora that he needs to go rendezvous with his partner Shiki, as their unique combat abilities can only be fully utilized when they're in a pair. They weren't expecting the nightmares to catch them off guard like this, as historically, Traverse Town is a place with very little noise. Neku concludes that these nightmares must have arrived here from somewhere else, which is even more unusual. Sora tells Neku not to worry. He's got a pretty decent handle on the whole spirit thing now. And he has a few tricks of his own that he hasn't shown off yet, so he's more than ready to bring the fight to the nightmares. While it is a riskier strategy than Neku typically likes, Sora's confidence is hard to deny. So going against his initial inclination, Neku allows Sora to head off alone. When Sora comes face to face with the nightmares, he's in no mood to waste time. Immediately cranking it up into second gear, he activates Strike Form. Or at least, he tried to. Cosmos had connected Sora to the powers of champions past. But just like her jurisdiction, that connection does not extend here.